Hello and welcome to Eye Openers. Thank you guys so much for joining us. As you know, we are here most Fridays. You might be catching us live on LinkedIn right now, YouTube, Facebook, or maybe you're watching the replay that you found on my website or hopefully from a friend that has forwarded it to you. As you know, what we do here is we try to provoke your thinking and pull out some insights, but we don't do it alone. We do it with the help of some caffeine, which is why I call the show Eye Openers. So cheers, Adam. Thank you so much
Hello,
for joining
Brittany.
me today. Um, those of us who are familiar with the show know I like to start out with the most important things first. What are you drinking?
Well, I'm actually drinking an Americano cafe long I made. We're very lucky in our office. We have a in-house espresso maker, which I purchased, and it's
Whoa.
very nice. Now I'm very spoiled, so now I can't go out and get coffee. Uh, and so some people say I'm coming back to the office only to have the coffee. Like I work from home, but I miss the coffee machine. In fact, one employee during the pandemic bought a replica of the machine for their house.
There you go. That's really investing in your team. I mean, that's what we're all about here. So I love hearing that. And
Hmm.
people say like that makes all the difference. Like I love going out to get coffee because I like trying new things and
Hmm.
whatever. But they say when you get that really good machine and you nail it, like you don't need to go anywhere else. So
Hmm.
it also
Definitely.
sounds better. Like an Americano sounds better when you say it.
An Americano. Well, in Britain, where I came from originally, they don't call it a latte; they call it a latte.
A latte.
And
Okay.
not a mocha, but a mocha.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
yes, I know, crazy, hey.
And you're not drinking tea, which a lot of my, British friends, people from the UK are always just sticking with the
I
tea. So
actually
when
don't
when
like
you get
tea. I
into
don't like tea. It's
you
funny.
don't like
So
tea.
I immigrated to the United States in 23 years ago, and I think it was the right move because I really can't stand. Sorry, anyone who's British on the call here. I'm not a tea drinker. I really can't stand tea. It's just weak and herby, and I like coffee. It's strong and bold, and
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll take you. You can
thank you.
join us for the coffee. And you guys know for me, I've been on my Bulletproof Coffee kick. So nothing new for me this week, but I'm so into it. Have you ever tried Bulletproof Coffee?
Is that an actual brand of coffee beans or is it a
They do
style?
have their own brand now, but I can't necessarily say I recommend that. But what it is instead of, I don't drink my coffee black. I used to drink it with a little bit of creamer.
Mm,
And this is a special kind of product they've made where there's MCT oil, there's other like collagen and different things that really add to mental focus. And
wow.
as if the coffee doesn't add to it enough, I know, but special well, whatever I can say, I'll send you a little link to it
Oh
because
wow.
they've heard me describe it before. But you know me, I love my bulletproof coffee and give it a little froth there, and it makes it feel kind of like a latte.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I'm going with this is the local roaster in the DC area, and in the Washington
Mhm.
DC area, there's a local family-owned company called Mayoga that makes, and I've no affiliation with them. They make coffee, and it's all fair trade, and all the electricity that's used to make the power the machinery is all renewable resources as well.
Love it. Well, thank you for giving them a plug because I want to hear about the local places and
Hmm.
hopefully, give them a little boost.
Absolutely.
So, let's give you a proper introduction. How about that? After we've got ourselves kind of caffeinated here, in about a 2 minute segment here. Tell me, how did we get from starting to code at age 10 to CEO founder of a tech company?
Oh, it's quite a short journey. If you ask people in my high school, they'd say, "Oh, yeah, that totally makes sense. That what happened?" Because I started programming at a young age, at age of 10, writing computer games, and you can find those games online, which I found a few weeks ago. Bizarrely, there are emulators that will run these old pieces of like old 8-bit computers from the 80s. They'll actually run in a browser. And I found my old games, and it was quite embarrassing. They're like, "Wow, this is terrible." My kids thought it was fun, but no. So I was a programmer, and I thought that was great. But I got to get a real job. So I go to college, do a degree in physics, and at the end of it, I realized I hate physics. Sorry to any physicists out there. It was, and I really like computers, and I haven't got a degree in it. And I lived in Britain at that point, but I came to America for a vacation, and this is in 1998. The internet is this new thing, pets.com, eBay, it was all new. And I
Mhm.
landed a job with a company called Sapient in Boston, through a friend of a friend, and I got a job offer there on a visa and worked there and worked my up to being a director of sales and technology at Sapient. And then 2006, I left to start a tech company. But one of the things I would like to credit to Sapient was they really believed in a strong company culture and values. and we'll
Mm.
get to this later, and I think it's some of the other things we're going to talk about. But
Yeah.
Saban was a really good pioneer in building a culture-driven organization. They really provide a lot of leadership and mentorship to people like myself who are more technical to get leadership skills, management skills, and build a holistic organization. And so, I had a great time there. I think I was there 8 years, and when I left to start a company, I really wanted to use some of that company culture leadership, take it to
Mm.
a product firm rather than a services firm, but apply a lot of the lessons I'd learned on the sort of the softer side of running a business from Sapient.
Yeah, I mean, what were 2 or 3 things that really stood out to you that they did that had the biggest impact, either as like growing yourself as a leader and that you wanted to take over to your
Well, the
company?
first thing was the company culture was the number one thing they looked for, and a lot of companies had mission statements or values on the wall, but
Yeah.
Sapient was very good about actually living them. So when you actually had a job interview, the first interview was a culture fit interview, where you had to demonstrate as best you could, obviously, how you would fit into the company culture, and then they would do a skill test, and you could fail the
Mm.
skill test and still be hired, but if you didn't
Wow.
meet the culture test, there was no way you couldn't come in as a non-culture fit, and
Yeah.
everything they did throughout the career hiring process, the mentoring, the rating, reviewing, and feedback process was all around making sure people work culture fits and also helping to improve the company culture. They did
Mm.
360 feedback. And they're very transparent. One of the culture values was openness, and they really practiced that in their feedback system.
Mm.
And they surely, they went through some layoffs and things later. And even during the darker times of the dot-com bust, they tried as best as they could to live the values. I think that's why they stayed independent much longer than a lot of the other companies that were acquired. And
Mm.
the second thing I think that was very good that they did was later on they actually put together a formal leadership program where they had people who were maybe been programmers, they could have been lowly associates, but or they could be directors, and they put them together in these small pods and had actual leadership sessions where you would take time off billable work for half a day and do a leadership offsite. And they encouraged that at all levels and teaching things like following. Modeling the behavior, encouraging people's vision, to the tenets of
Mhm.
leadership that you might get from a formal leadership course. They wanted to make sure that it was permeated throughout the organization.
Wonderful. Yeah, gosh, if that is like one thing I would love small business owners to understand is that investing in that a half day of your employees' time to show that you're interested in who they're becoming and you want to be a part of it and you're happy to like invest first and get the rewards later. That is one of the best things you can do. Not only are your employees learning how to better manage themselves, but ultimately become a better manager of a team. They
Definitely.
stay longer, they perform better, they ask the questions that other people aren't willing to ask. Like it is ultimately better for everybody, but you have to make that leap first. And I see so many people hold back, like, oh, there's no return on that. I don't know if I can afford to do that. But there's ways to creatively do it, like 4 hours at a time.
Right, I think that's very true. And even with the pandemic and people being virtual, you can do it remote. It is probably better somewhat in person. But one of the other things I would say about us being a small business, and obviously we are a small but hopefully growing business. Well, we are growing, but is you always say, oh, I won't do that. We'll do it later when I can make time for it. I think that's a false assumption. You need to start building in these ideas, even if you're a 4 or 5 person company. Having on a microcosm, a micro scale, implementing some of those things that you want to do later, because you'll never find the time later. It only gets harder, and the
Mhm.
company's culture is built brick by brick as you grow the company. And if you grow fast without that culture being intentional, you'll end up with an unintentional company culture, which may not be what you want or intended.
Completely. Yeah, whether you like it or not, your company has culture.
Hmm.
Even if you're a company of one, and I teach this a lot to people who are just starting out, that do this exact same exercise for yourself. Get a
Hmm.
360 from your family. And although that might be incredibly painful, or from your
Hmm.
customers, they're a really great place to do it if you're
Hmm.
new. Um,
That's a good idea.
but what are you measuring your own success against? Like so many people who are just starting out, they don't have metrics that they're using. They have these completely unreasonable expectations and they feel like they're failing. Well, it's you wouldn't do that to anybody else. Why are you doing it to yourself? And so
Hmm.
this can also be implemented in small startups. So pay attention. It is something that can be incredibly helpful.
Hmm.
Really great point about, do it in person if you can, but don't wait.
Right.
Don't wait.
That's what I mean exactly.
So many organizations, yeah, put it off next year. Maybe we'll have the time, maybe we'll have the money, whatever. But if somebody looked at your organization and they didn't see the words on the wall, the values or whatever, how would they describe your company? I think that's a really important question to ask yourself all the time, really, because that shows, are you living these values or not? And
Hmm.
if you're, guaranteed you're putting a message out. If you like the message or not, that's up to you. That's up to you to like hold the mirror up and look at like, are we living the values we want to be living? Because we're definitely sending out a message. Let's look at what that message is and see how we want it to change. Yeah, great. Well, there's something interesting though, because we spoke before. We do a pre-call, right, to make sure I'm bringing you guys the best, most interesting guests here. So when we spoke before about your time at consulting, you had said something about that it was really humbling when you did leave that job. What was that experience
Oh,
like for you?
well, one of the I think it's the one that we're talking about was you. So you leave a job. Well, you're in a job, and you're important, and that importance comes from the title, the people you work with, and the connections, and you think you're indispensable. And I remember being I think director of as when I left as a director of technology and sales at Sapient. I would get my cell phone was ringing all the time, lots of calls. I'm really important. I'm busy. I'm indispensable. And then I left to start a company and take some time off. In fact, and the next day I remember waking up and my phone didn't ring at all. And the next day, the same thing. And literally, you walk out of the office with if you own your phone, maybe not even that, your phone, not even your computer, because that usually belongs to the company. Maybe some paperwork, and not even much of that these days. And that's it. And then when you look back at all these people and all the tasks and all the to-do list, um, it's never that important. You're never as indispensable as you think you are. And if you do a good job, you shouldn't be. You should be helping to transition to other people and doing that. And then you realize, of the two or three people you knew at that company, you might stay in touch with. The rest, probably you won't, which is sort of humbling because you spend so much of your day in a job. And if you're not intentional about that job and maybe it's just a place you work, it's not as important to you for the most part as you think it is, unfortunately.
Right, right. Well, is that unfortunately or is that fortunately?
It's really neither. It is the way it is what it is. It's unfortunate because people I think if people recognize that and think made time for other relationships outside of their work, I think it's completely fine. It's actually rational. It's reasonable. It's what workers, it's what jobs expect from you and what you should expect from a job. But the problem I found, particularly in the dot-com era, and it's happened a little bit since, was people got so wrapped up in work, and companies would give you free food and stay late, and they, in some ways, cut off the rest of your social network, and you became so vested at a professional and a personal level at the company that it was hard to leave. And if you left, you lost your entire friend group, as my son would say.
Right, right.
Um,
So maybe it's great to like understand that now, right? You're taking that with you, understand it now. I bet it shapes how you design jobs now. I mean, because now that's up to you. Do you do the free food to have people stay late to cut off from other relationships, or are you promoting balance? Are you promoting a life outside of work? I
That's a
think
great, and actually, one of our company core values is family and life flexibility, and the second one is called second acts. And if I can digress for just a minute on them,
yes,
so
please.
second acts they work together. So one of the reasons I left Sapient, and no defense to anyone from Sapient watching, I love working there; it was a great place. But when I got a little bit older, I had a family. Consulting wasn't such a great business to be a family person. I had young kids, and when I started Inflectra, which I wanted to be a place where you could work part time. Many of our employees are part time. Many started part time, and I
Mm,
wanted to be a place where you could have and raise a family, and you could leave at 5 o'clock and you come in at 9 the next day, and it wasn't like you had to work till midnight. So we do have a happy hour once a month and some nice things to make people enjoy being here. But I'm also want to kick people out at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. Like, no, you need to go now. Why are you here? And I try and do things like not send emails after hours. I'll use Google Schedule Send and other techniques to try and avoid creating the feeling. Sometimes I'm doing work in the evenings, being the owner and the CEO. You don't have that luxury
sure.
sometimes, but I don't want them receiving it till the next morning. So if you're a leader, using tools to delay send or schedule send messages, things to avoid this feeling of constantly needing to be on is really, really important. And then the
Mm,
second thing is what I call second acts. I think this is one of the things that's been very successful for us is finding people with great skills who aren't necessarily in the industry where they think they want to be or could be. So when people apply to you for a job, are you looking at the current job they have or the degree they have, or are you looking at the skills they could bring to the table in a completely different role? And we
mm,
very much focus on the latter, hence the idea of second acts. Everyone has a
mm,
second act. And same thing for me. I had a degree in physics and I ended up becoming computers. I have no degree in computer science. I was all self-taught. And many people at the company that's the same position. People in our business development, they came from other backgrounds like education or nonprofit.
mm,
So we try and really find good people who have got good skills. Can we translate that skill? And we work really hard to get people who have left the workforce for various reasons, looking after children, elderly parents, or anything like that. Can we bring
mm,
them back in and retrain them so they can be part of the workforce? And we work really hard on those kind of aspects of skills and mentorship.
mm. Awesome. Great.
Wonderful.
Um, so Guys, that was all off script. That's how good he is. He's off script. And that's why I wanted to have you here, because you have that experience and you're so willing to talk about, how humbling that was, and that you're actually taking it, learning about it, carrying it over. And that speaks to what you just said too, that, hey, people have value from other industries. They have these experiences. And I also love the idea that they're going to bring things from different industries that maybe you haven't looked at yet. So there's so much value in looking at people who don't maybe necessarily fit that classic description of who that employee should be.
Absolutely.
Right. Especially now, since people are really making big changes. They are jumping around to different industries, trying stuff that's brand new, and you're giving them a chance. I love that. So big question here that I like to jump off with, which we're not really jumping off, but if we were to speak 3 years from now, what would you have accomplished that you would love to tell me about? Hey, Brittany, it's so great to hear from you. I'm so glad you called. Still drinking my lattes.
Mhm.
And here's what we've done here.
This is a hard one to think about because in terms of the company or in terms of personally, and we built a company which is growing 40%. We've taken no venture capital; it's entirely bootstrapped,
Amazing.
as to use the words of the day. I always find that a
Yeah.
strange word because we've been going for a while. It's not really bootstrapped, but I think what I would love for us to be in 3 years' time, and I would feel successful, is if we had basically people in our that we're trying to get to knew of us and respected us in our industry around the world, because we are a global company despite being very small, and we have customers in almost every continent. And
Wow.
one of the hardest things though is that people don't know of you. They're like, oh, if only I knew this product, and why doesn't everyone else know about it? And we've several former customers have become employees because of that. They love our values, they
Mhm.
love us. Um, and I think if so, in 3 years' time, what I see is the industry that we work in technology. There's so much innovation going on. A lot of our customers are doing things like Internet of Things for medical devices, smart pacemakers, mobile devices for using in hospitals,
Mhm.
aerial drones. Lots of the customers we have, a lot of the companies we have as customers are in very high tech fields. Some really cool, amazing stuff. Some of which I can't even probably disclose. But we're ultimately like I always think of it as it's like the gold rush. They're the gold rush people, and we're like the people selling Levi's and pickaxes. So we're the kind of the supplier of we sell testing and requirements and project management software. It's not as glamorous as what they do, but what they use is our tools to make their glamorous industry. Satellites. We have some small space startups as
Mhm.
customers, and personal helicopter taxi kind of people, remote control forklifts in warehouses. There's some amazing stuff that our customers are doing. Nuclear power, more exciting than probably than our company, but we're enabling it. So I would say in 3 years' time, I would love to find out what we enabled and find out that we have enabled these companies to do amazing things, and we were kind of like that essential service that helped them do it. That to
Mm.
me would be very gratifying, and knowing all these industries that I would love to be working in, but there's only one of me. We are kind of like doing that.
Right. So, what do you think is the greatest opportunity in getting there? What is the thing that you guys, can be doing to make that happen?
The number one thing, and this is why we've been focusing on it, is actually enlisting help. So one of the challenges of a small company, if anyone watching this has got a small company, is you only have a certain amount of money and you can only hire a certain amount of salespeople and people to spread the message. So one of the things that I think was a big eye opener for us was building a partner network. So building partners that you can use that will take your message independently of yourself and have their own things that they'll bring to the table. And so what we're doing is empowering partners. Every one of our regional area kind of representatives has been told, find 10 partners this year. So 10 partners in Latin America, 10 partners in North America, 10 in Asia, et cetera, et cetera. Around each of the regions, we have people. And I want those 10 companies to be helping spread the message. And that's how you can build something which will grow and grow and grow through network effects. So, but
Mhm.
also not just that, we only know certain things. We only have certain skills. I'm not a rocket engineer. I don't know nuclear power all that well. Just my physics degree from 25 years
Yeah.
ago. Um, right, but our partners do. We have some partners in life sciences. That's all they do every single day. So when we're looking at some of these life science customers, they can bring so much more to the table. So if you're a small business owner, don't just look at your team that you've hired. Look at the people who affiliate with you, your partners, your resellers, people that enthusiasts. We have quite a lot of companies that are enthusiasts. They're independent people who are independent consultants, and they're just evangelists for the product. Those
Yes.
people are incredibly powerful. Find them, nurture them, make them feel valued. That's probably more powerful than having to hire another salesperson of your own. So you can grow a small company much more quickly and efficiently, especially if you're not one of the big $100 million VC funded behemoths. using these kind of techniques, and it's really powerful, and it's just amazing. You get to meet lots of really great people too.
Mhm. Really great point. So when you have a product or service that people already love, they're already raving about, capturing that and helping them help you, right?
Mhm.
So I use the term ambassador when I
Mhm.
think about that, because they're out there doing that work,
Mhm.
for me, and I don't even have to. And it's actually so much more powerful with the social proof, having it come from somebody else than necessarily yourself.
It
So
carries more weight. Absolutely, it does.
it
Yes.
does, totally, right? Um, and I think about how you make that ask is really important. I have a community that is invitation only of current and former clients that I bring together once a month and allow them to kind of meet each other. Everybody I work with is running a business, has something really valuable to bring to the table, is a genius in their own right. And it's so fun to watch. Like I paired up one of my people in my network who's a lawyer with the person who's just launched a cryptocurrency platform. And I would have never in my own mind thought to connect them, but she was like, hey, I want to talk to so-and-so about this. And I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
brilliant. Happy to do it. Right. And it creates such a nice synergy that you get to be at the center of.
Mhm.
And so that network effect is really everything. I mean, that is Web 3.0, right?
Mhm.
Like as we've seen it kind of start to come together. And so
Mhm.
playing on that is huge. So, what do you think are, and this goes back to an earlier theme where we were saying these transferable skills, experiences. What got you to where you are today? What would you say were some, key moments of insight or eye-opening situations that kind of brought you to where you are?
Right. I mean, well, it's a whole journey. One of the things, I mean, so when you start a company, you have to be a jack of all trades. So the first thing I think that got us off the ground was being able to do a lot of things at once, being able to code, being able to do business, being able to do, do marketing and finance, accounting. So if you're going to start a business, or if you're working in an area where you don't have a lot of other people, being,
Mhm.
I think, fairly much of a generalist is a good thing to be able to do. Nothing is beneath you. So I literally went to the library and got a book on accounting and learned what is accounting? How do you do double entry bookkeeping? Because I need to do it, and I have an accountant that helps me. But you can't usually afford to have a controller as a small company. Same thing as a lawyer. Realistically, when you're smaller, you can't review every single document that's routine with a lawyer. You would have no money left. So you've got to be able to be to some degree a basic lawyer, a basic accountant, business operations person, marketing. You're a bit of everything. So to start a company or any organization, if it's a nonprofit, same thing. You've got to be able to be multi-hatted and a little bit of a, what do you say, a renaissance person. That's a really good thing, and you need that. Otherwise, you'll never get off the ground at all. But then as you get going, then is the hard thing you have to learn, is that you can't do that anymore. So letting go and knowing what to let go and when and who to bring in, that's the hard part about sort of growth and transformation. And so some of the roadblocks along the way would have been I was doing too much, or you were doing things out of order. Like, well, I was hiring an SEO firm before I had a marketing person. So that and so things like that, I had to get. So I had some advice from career coaches who said, "Well, that's
Yeah.
backwards. First, get a head of marketing who can focus on it, then hire an SEO firm, because right now you haven't got time to manage them. So
Yeah.
they're not doing a good job, not because they're not good, but because you don't have the time to focus." So I think
Completely.
that those kinds of insights are really important when you start a business and grow a business. Is that
Mm.
knowing when to give up certain things and what order, and what you should outsource and what you should not outsource. There's some schools of
Great
thought which are
point.
outsource everything, but then that leaves you with basically a brand and nothing that you control. The quality probably suffers, and so I think you've got to find out what's core for your company that you should keep in source. What can you outsource? That's a longer conversation,
Mm,
but
mm,
definitely be intentional about it. Know what your company stands for. So, for example, if customer support is an important value that you believe is a differentiator, you shouldn't
mm,
outsource your support, but people do that. Things like that. If quality is supposed to be really important, you outsource it to the lowest software development company you can get, then your values and your actions don't align.
right, right. Really great point. Really great point there. Values and actions aligning. I made a note of that
Mhm.
because that was such a key point. I haven't heard anybody specifically, explicitly make yet on this show. So thank you.
Oh.
Um, So, you're set out to build this. You understand how to align with your values and your actions. So, what would you say right now is your greatest challenge that might hold you back from achieving the vision you've set out to achieve?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's elements of the same thing. I think my number one weakness generally is impatience. I'm a naturally I speak fast. I think fast. I
I
drink
was going
coffee
to say, we
fast.
can tell from the rate at which you speak.
So, and that's a problem sometimes. So I speak quite fast and I think quite fast and I have a natural impatience. And my daughter will always tell me, you need to be more patient, and I think so. Sometimes impatience, the danger with impatience can be you can make a decision, and when you don't get the results in a week, you're like, well, let's do something different. So you can't measure your results. And so,
Yep.
especially in marketing and digital business, that's not, everyone knows that's not a good thing. You've got to A/B test, and the other weakness I would say, which is related to this, is when you start a company. And I think we've talked about this already, is that an entrepreneur is very much rule breaking, if in the CMM level world, the CMM level 0, chaos that works just enough to get the product off the ground, no rules, no process, everyone make it up, common sense, don't worry about it, we'll get there later. And
Yep.
and now we're a bigger company, and the people I've hired are more like process a bit more, and I see the value of process, but I do resist it internally. I have this tension with it. So I recognize this is an important process we have to put in place, but I really don't like it, but I know we have to have it. And I think that's a
Mm,
hard thing for anyone who's growing a business. And there are some people who really just can't get beyond that. And those are the kind of people who literally will start a business, and 4 years they'll sell it and start another one and another one, another one. And that's completely good. That means you know yourself well enough to know that that's what you enjoy. There are other people who like to grow a business and build it and want to stick with it. And they can make that transformation from a startup to a large company. And they know that their role will change and that it will be a different feel than it was, and they're okay with it. But and either is okay. Just you need to understand that know thyself and then know what you should do.
Great point. Great point. I was just giving a talk 2 days ago, actually, to a big IT group, and knowing thyself is the most important thing, because
Hmm.
if you're frustrated with your job, if you're frustrated with your boss, like there's always a self-awareness component of that, and we don't talk about it enough. But
Hmm.
really, like working on that and committing to that process really can alleviate all the places of friction and tension in so many other spots in your life and your job. So was really reinforcing that. So thanks for bringing that up. But
Welcome.
I've got to ask. So some of you guys watching don't know behind the scenes that I ask everybody that I'm looking to bring onto the show if they're going to be willing to get a bit vulnerable and share those moments of failings or challenges or weaknesses. Not everybody is. So I'm so glad that you brought this up and that you were willing to share that is a point of resistance for you. But so I've got to dig a little bit more into it and find out, why are you resistant to process? Or is it bureaucracy, or is it coming from a big firm before? Like, what is it about?
That's a good question. Well, I think it is partly coming from seeing sapient, someone's tie itself in knots and wind and rules that were arbitrary. So I think that's true. I think I have a cultural need for autonomy. Someone, I think one of my friends said, Adam, you have a massive need for autonomy. And so it's okay. So being the CEO of a company is interesting because you have to model the behavior. So that's the problem. So the hard part, I suppose, is that the reality is, because we're a privately held company, for the most part, I can do what I want. I mean, I run the company. It's not, there's no VC coming up, breathing down my neck and saying, hey, why aren't you doing this? We have a board of directors and stuff, but it's not like that. It's a small company feel. But as a CEO, you have to model the behavior. So if there's a process that is potentially bureaucratic, but you're asking other people to follow it, then you need to follow it. So I think that's some of it. Is that I want freedom, but I also need to be responsible and be a good leader. The tension between those two, and I do see there's a danger where people do start to put together process because you need process over here, but they don't think about, well, can we remove process from over there because we now have this new process, and you can end up. I've seen companies and I've even seen ourselves start to get into that, where you end up having so much process that you forget that you lose sight of what the objective was, and you go through 10 steps to do something, and at the end, the thing that you did was either too late or wasn't nimble enough. So having process is good, but having mechanisms to know when something needs urgency. So one of the stories I tell often is when I first started the company, we were smaller. The head of marketing had just joined, and she came from the UN world. And I remember she came in once and said, "Hey Adam, I think we should do something. I don't know what it was, some marketing campaign." I said to her, "Let's do it." And then she came back an hour later and said, "Well, when you said let's do it, did you mean like actually just do it?" I went, "Yeah, let's do it. Here's my credit card. Go do it. Isn't it done yet?" And she was used to
Yeah.
being at UN where there'll be like 10 committees. So I think that, and that was really powerful. She loved that. She realized that she had the power to do things, and her voice counted. She didn't have to persuade a committee of 10 people at a nonprofit to do something. So I think
Yeah.
that was a really powerful thing. And I'm afraid of us losing. I'm afraid of any small company losing that dexterity and nimbleness, which is one of the benefits you have over a big company that might be a better funded competitor. Now, on the
Sure.
other hand, you can't have 25, 50, 60 people all doing that. So that's why I say it's a balance. What worked as a very small company, as you get bigger and bigger, it doesn't always work, or not for everyone. So it's balancing those. So I guess that's my fear, is that we'll become a small bureaucratic company, and we'll never get to be a big company. So
Mm.
it's just a tension.
Yeah, yeah, it's a healthy tension, it sounds like, right? You're paying attention to it. And that's
Hmm.
why I do this process of reflecting on these things with you. Like, you understand your resistant point. You understand the narrative and the story of the place that it came from. You want to make sure you avoid getting there, but you understand that there's some value of process.
The one thing, if anyone is worried about that, would be any kind of attention, is always empower the people who you lead to be able to tell you the truth. So one of the things, we have a leadership meeting with 3 or 4 of us who are on the leadership team, and they're more process driven than me. And we have this, and we say we have this tension. They know I like to do things quickly, and they like to do things, more process. But I'm always they always say, we can disagree, but I always can tell you to your face why I disagree, and that's okay. So the fact that we can have these open, candid conversations where they'll say, "Here's why you're wrong," and I'll go, "You're right. I'm wrong. We should definitely have this process. It makes sense now." Um,
Yeah.
if you have that level of candor with people you trust, then it doesn't matter if you go too much one way or the other. There's correcting mechanisms. But if everyone's afraid to tell you the straight answer, then either you can veer one way or the other way too much.
Yeah. Yeah. Really great point. People to keep you accountable, keep you in check, who have different preferences than you, to really get
Exactly.
balance. Super important. Really important. Um, Yeah, I've seen so many people, they start their business because they left somewhere where they knew that they could do it maybe better, different, faster, whatever. And there's this resistance to process. But as you grow, it's impossible to give 20 plus people complete autonomy. You
Right.
don't want to slow the system, but there is there is a lot of value in having process too. I use a tool when I work with an organization to help measure what is the team actually looking for, because you have your own idea of what you think is most important. The leadership does too, but
Hmm.
it's so valuable to also hear from your team about how they assess the current situation of where you guys fall in that balance and where they
Hmm.
want to be. I'll be happy to share it with you offline, but just
Thank you.
there's mechanisms, right, for getting this information, and also like using those interviews, making it a core value that we have that transparent communication to keep talking. And that's how you work through challenges to begin with, right?
Hmm.
What is that number one behavior that is like the biggest and easy to skill to transfer for you? So you took it from, maybe different parts of, maybe since you were 10 in your coding, or
Hmm.
what is that skill or behavior that has served you in these different areas that um, I have it shaped here as holding you back, but I don't want to ask that question. I want to ask the question of,
Right, because I was thinking that was sort of because I was the question of that the answer to that question I think was actually being able to do everything and having to then develop process and being more
right.
disciplined. I think that was what got us here. What would I think it would have held us back. Now, in terms of one of the things I think a very useful skill that has definitely got me where I am, I think is being actually thick-skinned.
Thick
You start,
skin.
yeah, thick skin, meaning that you start a business with a new idea, and everyone's going to tell you the idea sucks. There's no chance of it working. Some customers are going to say it's hard to use, it's ugly, it's terrible, it's too expensive, it's too cheap. Any number of all of these things, usually all at the same time, like too expensive and too cheap. It's too hard to use. It's too simple. It's got too many features. No, it's too. You'll get all of these all the time from different people. Some of the same people. Um, and it makes no sense. And you have to listen to feedback. That's good. You want to have mechanisms that are structured, like net promoter value and all these things that you'll do if you're building a company. But on the other hand, emotionally, you can't let it get to you, because if you do, you'll never make a decision. You'll never get anywhere. And people, when they criticize you, it's usually coming from a place where they are. Maybe their current job is such a certain way that they need a tool that's more that way, or they've used all these really old computer systems that are very difficult to use. Everyone comes from with their own baggage, effectively, and so you have to listen to it, and you can listen to it, write it down, fine. I thank you for your feedback, but you don't necessarily have to internalize all of it. So I think being a little bit thick-skinned is good,
Yeah.
and also as a leader, you're going to invite people in the company to tell you why they're unhappy, why things are wrong, and they can essentially complain to you, and that's your job. But you can never complain back to them, and so therefore, I think a little bit of a thick skin is necessary because you otherwise would probably need therapy. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, you just it's just a lot to take on. You have to be able to have a little bit of a barrier and not take everything too personally, because people having a bad day, they need to vent at you, and that's your job, is to be that person to vent at. It doesn't mean you have to necessarily fix everything that once. It may just be
Totally.
listening. Sometimes is all that's needed.
So what's helped you? I mean, being thick-skinned is one thing, but when like someone comes to you and they have complaints or challenges or whatever, and you're like in the middle of your day and you've got all this stuff going on, like how do you manage that? What tools, skills, support systems, what's helped you kind of manage that?
Oh, that's probably an area I'm not so good at. I try my best. 'Cause being impatient, you see that's a hard thing because you want to get on with what you're doing. First thing is first thing I've learned, and I think being married and having kids has helped this. Has helped me. So obviously that's because when you have children, they'll come to you any given moment with something. And my kids are now
Mhm.
in their 20s and late teens, so they have different challenges. But the people will come to you at any kind of moment. I think the willingness, you have to be able to. You can't always drop everything, so it's fine to say, "I'm right in the middle of something. Let's schedule time in an hour or two." So I think people, if you can't drop something at that moment, giving people a concrete time when you can listen to them is important. And I would say, if you truly feel you can't be mindful for them at that moment, don't try and listen to them, because half listening to someone is worse than telling someone to come back in an hour and making time on your calendar to listen to them. So I would say be intentional about when you are going to listen to them and what they want to talk about. When you do that, don't have cell phones. Listen to them. Maybe take notes, but don't don't necessarily have to argue with people, or just listen. People always want to try and solve the problem. I think the biggest mistake people often want to make is when someone's complaining is solve the problem right there and then. I think oftentimes if you just listen, take note, take stock, promise that you will get back to them, and do get back to them, but don't feel like you have to necessarily live solve. A lot of engineers, and coming from computers
Yeah,
background, we often
yeah,
have this tendency to want to fix something right away. It's an
yeah,
engineering problem to be solved, and that's often the wrong approach. And it's true with clients. If you're in a client meeting, never mind employees, and you're doing it as a sales call that goes sideways, it's often because a client had a problem that you thought you wanted to try and solve right there on the call, and they didn't really have a problem necessarily. It was something that you misunderstood. So there are times when you should solve problems, and there are times when you should just listen,
mm,
take notes, and then reflect, and then come back. I would say that's some of what I try and do, is not always react right away. Generally, be patient. Don't react. Write enough down that I can remember what they said, and where it makes sense, obviously do have it. If it's something really urgent, obviously you will have to sometimes take action. But I would say avoid the tendency to overreact. That's, I think,
mhm.
number one.
Really great points, and I completely agree with you. Nothing has been a greater way of learning this skill set than being a parent or being in a marriage. So those things can certainly help.
I would have said that, but that might get me in trouble.
Just let me say it for you then, no problem. So, Adam, how can people find you if they want to learn more about Inflectra, if they want to hear more about your awesome leadership? I know you guys are doing a live event. Tell us how they can
Oh,
find you.
perfect. So actually, I was going to plug that too. So, well, first of all, to learn about the company, Inflectra.com, the signs above me, you can go there. I'm on LinkedIn, Adam Sandman. There aren't many of us. There's me and I think an eye doctor somewhere in Cleveland. So, and he,
I'll make sure the right tags are in
right,
the show
exactly.
notes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So LinkedIn, and I'm on the website are pretty good. I'm on Twitter, but I don't use it as much these days. And then I would definitely like to say, if you are in the Washington D.C. area, or honestly anywhere in the country in technology, we are having a live event May 5th and 6th in the Washington D.C. area. And it's going to be a 2-day software testing and agile and DevOps festival. We've got 30 to 40 awesome speakers from around the world coming.
Oh, wow.
It's our first live event for 2 years that we're doing. It's at the Gallaudet University in Washington D.C., which is the only university in the world for people who are deaf. Now it's that we're just hosting it there. Obviously, but it is a unique place. It's a Victorian campus building. It's beautiful, and come see us at InflectraCon, as it's called, and we'd love to see you there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's been a wonderful interview. Lots of eye-opening moments that I have taken notes on, and I'm definitely going to make sure I clip it out for you guys so you can find them
Thank you.
fast. Wonderful conversation. I really appreciate you being here. And for you guys, if you have any follow-up questions, you can write them wherever you're seeing this now. There's always going to be a comment section below, whichever platform you're on. And you can reach out to me if you need to get in touch with Adam. Until next time, guys, keep looking for those thought-provoking, eye-opening moments.
Thanks,
Thanks so much for
Brittany.
being here.